What if some of the best cozy farming RPGs are the ones no one's talking about? There are so many hidden gems right now, full of farming, story, and heart, just waiting to be discovered. Let me show you a few that truly deserve more attention. Let's start with Shine Hill, a cozy life sim with a really fun twist. You're secretly an alien pretending to be a normal villager on a peaceful island. You farm, fish, cook, explore dungeons, and build friendships like any other farming game. But behind the scenes, you're also trying to stay undercover and figure out what's really going on with the island. The story slowly unfolds as you get closer to people, and there's this quiet tension of something isn't right here, which gives the usual cozy routine a bit more mystery. It's also a shorter, more focused experience, so it's great if you're burned out on massive farming sims and want something fresh but still familiar. This is perfect for players who love cozy games with a bit of humor, light mystery, and low-pressure progression, especially if you want a life sim that respects your time and doesn't expect you to grind everything out. Next is if you've ever wanted a farming sim that feels a bit more like being a curious researcher instead of just grinding crops every day, then Research Story might surprise you. In a good way, as long as you know what you're getting into. The game puts you in the role of a researcher sent to a growing town called Shimmerbrook, and instead of just farming for profit, your main goal is to study the world around you, discovering plants, creatures, and fish, then documenting everything in an archive. You'll still farm, fish, mine, and build relationships, but everything ties back to learning how the ecosystem works. That said, there are moments where you might feel a little lost or need to experiment more than expected. So, if you prefer games that guide you step by step, this might feel a bit rough early on. If you're the type of player who enjoys learning as you go and doesn't mind a few rough edges, this can be a refreshing break from the usual farming sim formula. Then we have Cattle Country, a cozy farming and life sim set in a Wild West town where you're not just growing crops, but also building a life on the frontier. Your days are a mix of ranching, mining, fishing, crafting, and slowly becoming part of a tight-knit community. You'll also deal with bandits, go on story-driven quests, hunt in the wild, and even take part in things like cattle drives and town events. That said, this is one of those games where it really depends on what you're looking for. I enjoyed it for its relaxing pace, Wild West vibe, and the mix of cozy farming with light action and storytelling. But it does have some rough edges, like repetitive dialogue, limited tutorials, and some quality of life issues. Inventory, controls, and progression clarity can feel a bit clunky. So this is best for players who enjoy games like Stardew Valley, but want something with a different theme and don't mind figuring things out as they go. Next is Cornucopia, one of those farming sims that feels familiar at first, but the more you play, the more you realize it's trying to do things a little differently. There's no forced bedtime, your inventory manages itself when it overflows, and even the game speed can be adjusted depending on your mood. Farming itself is deeper than expected. You're not just planting crops, you're actually managing soil nutrients and compost, which makes growing things feel more rewarding. On top of that, there's a lot packed in here. Minigames, dungeons, collectibles, and a huge number of romance options, so it can feel like a sandbox where you just explore at your own pace. That said, it's not perfect. The world can be a bit empty in places, and certain systems, like combat or dialogue, don't always feel as polished as the farming side. It's one of those titles where your experience can really depend on what you personally value most. Then we have Little Known Galaxy. You play as a captain in training living on a spaceship with your crew. And instead of inheriting a farm, you're helping restore your ship while investigating a mysterious relic on a distant planet. Your daily life is a mix of tending crops in space, crafting machines, exploring alien planets, and building relationships with your crew. It's cozy, light, and focused on teamwork, like building a small community just floating through the galaxy. There's also a unique little system where you collect microbes around the ship, which adds variety to the usual farming loop. Just keep in mind it's a slow burn. Progression can feel grindy, and movement isn't the smoothest. But if you want a relaxing, space-themed life sim and don't mind taking things slow, this one's definitely worth a look. Next, we have Verdant Skies, a cozy life sim set on an alien planet where you start with a simple farm. But as you gather resources and contribute to the community, more colonists arrive and the world slowly expands. The game can feel a bit dated, but what makes it feel different is how it leans into experimentation. Because you can actually combine alien plants using a genetic splicing system to create new hybrids. The cast is diverse, and building relationships unlocks their personal stories. Though it's worth knowing that these stories are fairly simple and not as deep. In terms of gameplay, it's relaxing and familiar, farming, crafting, fishing, decorating, but it can feel a bit directionless over time. Overall, Verdant Skies is best for players who want a low-pressure life sim where you can experiment and just enjoy the process. But if you're looking for a strong story or structured progression, this might feel a little too light. Then we have Song of the Prairie, a 3D farming life sim where you move to a quiet, slightly forgotten town and slowly help bring it back to life at your own pace. What makes it stand out is how hands-on everything feels. Your crops visibly grow through stages, animals have special abilities, and you can even hire farm hands to help as your farm expands. There's also a relationship system where you get to know townsfolk more deeply, including a unique inner world feature that lets you understand their thoughts and backstories in a more personal way. That said, this is one of those games where expectations matter, because it does come with some rough edges, mainly bugs, translation issues, and character writing that can feel awkward or inconsistent. So if you're someone who values polished storytelling and strong character writing, you might want to wait for updates. But if you just want a chill farming game with some fresh ideas and don't mind imperfections, this could still be a cozy hidden gem worth trying. Then we have, if you've ever wondered what a life sim would feel like from a cat's point of view, Cattail's Wildwood story leans fully into that idea. You lead a small colony into a new wilderness, hunting for food, gathering herbs, and slowly building a home for your group. You'll meet other cats, form friendships or romance, and even raise a family while uncovering a bigger mystery about strange enemies threatening your territory. Hunting replaces farming as your main way to get food, exploration feels more natural, and you can bring a companion cat with you who grows stronger over time. There's also a lot of freedom in customizing your character, your den, and even how your colony expands, which makes it feel more personal than most farming sims. However, some systems can feel unclear at first, like where to find certain resources or how progression works, and combat can be tough early on until you level up. So there's a bit of a learning curve, especially if you're used to more guided games. Overall, this is for players who enjoy cozy sims, but want something a little different from the usual crop-focused routine. Then we have Dolok Town. If you're looking for something cozy but a little different, Dolok Town is basically a farming life sim set in a quiet post-apocalyptic world. You're rebuilding your farm from scratch in a place full of ruins, scrap materials, and survivors just trying to live their lives. You gather resources, grow crops, raise animals, even some in water, and slowly turn this harsh land into something that feels like home while uncovering small stories from the people around you. I like that you're not just planting crops, but you're also protecting them from acid rain, breaking down trash for crafting parts, and adapting to extreme weather. It also leans a bit into side-scrolling exploration, so it feels more like you're actively discovering the world instead of just staying on your farm. If you enjoy cozy games like Stardew, but wish they experimented more with survival, exploration, and world building, this is definitely one to keep an eye on. Next up is Tales of CQ, a cozy life sim with a magical twist. where you return to a hidden island full of yokai, or spirit-like beings, after losing your family in the past. On the surface, it has all the familiar systems: farming, fishing, crafting, romance. But what makes it feel different is how everything ties into your yokai abilities. Instead of just using tools, you can shapeshift into different forms to do tasks, like flying across the map as a crow or watering crops in a more creative way. This is one of those really promising but still growing kinds of games. I love the relaxing vibe, the character designs, and how alive the world can feel, especially with interactive pets and a solid amount of things to do even in early access. But it's not fully polished yet. You might run into bugs, unfinished storylines, or systems that feel a bit too easy or slightly clunky. So, this is best for players who enjoy discovering new mechanics and don't mind a work-in-progress experience. Then we have Touhou Farming. It's basically a cozy farming sim where you play as a small harvest goddess trying to prove herself by growing crops and helping a village thrive. The story is simple but charming. You're building up your reputation, meeting a lively cast of characters, and slowly turning your farm into something people believe in. It has that familiar loop of planting, fishing, mining, and talking to villagers, but with a colorful fantasy twist. You can also choose how you want to play: a relaxed mode with no time pressure, or a more structured mode where planning your days really matters. It leans a bit more into thoughtful farm layout too. You can't just walk through crops, so you're gently encouraged to think ahead. That said, since it's still in early access, some parts feel unfinished, especially later content and certain systems. It's especially worth checking out if you like character-driven games, light strategy in your farm design, or just want something that feels a bit more personal and handcrafted. Then we have Sunnyside. The game starts with a pretty grounded setup. You move to a quiet countryside town in Japan and build your life from scratch. You grow crops, raise animals, cook, and get to know the people around you. But it's less about becoming the best farmer ever and more about finding your own pace and lifestyle. At its core, this is a life sim about balance between work, relationships, and just enjoying your day. And what really sets Sunnyside apart is how modern it feels. Instead of the usual tools and routines, you're using things like hoses, solar power, drip irrigation, and even drones. It removes some of the repetitive grind you might expect from farming sims and replaces it with systems that feel closer to real-life homesteading. I really like the idea and vibe, but it can feel unpolished right now. The good news is the developers are back in control and actively working toward improving it, which gives people hope for the future. So if you want something polished, maybe wait. But if you're looking for a fresh, slower life sim that tries something different, Sunnyside is definitely one to keep on your radar. Next is Seeds of Calamity. You play as a young adventurer settling into a small village, still recovering from a past disaster. Day-to-day life feels familiar in a good way. You grow crops, help neighbors, fish, and slowly rebuild the community. But what gives it a different flavor is how naturally it blends that cozy routine with dungeon runs. When you head into a dungeon, it becomes your main focus for the day, where time pauses, and you push forward room by room until you're done. And instead of the usual real-time fighting, you use spells through your floating spellbook companion, which also acts like your guide. On the cozy side, the game also removes a lot of small frustrations. Tools don't break, watering is easier, and tutorials actually explain things clearly, which helps you settle in quickly. That said, it's a smaller game compared to big names in the genre. The quest system can also feel a bit limiting early on. But if you go in expecting a more compact, focused experience, it feels thoughtfully made, especially for a solo developer project. Then we have Snacko. The game is about two cats leaving city life behind to rebuild a forgotten island. When you arrive, the place is basically abandoned due to a strange curse, so your goal is to gather resources, rebuild the town, invite new villagers, and slowly bring life back to the island. You'll be designing the whole town, choosing who moves in, and placing buildings wherever you want. It also removes a lot of common frustrations in the genre, like inventory limits and running back home constantly. At the same time, progression is heavily tied to quests, which can feel a bit restrictive if you just want to focus on farming, and some NPC interactions can feel a little shallow over time. This is a great fit for players who enjoy relaxing games with lots of freedom to build and customize, especially if you like the idea of town building mixed with farming. It's also beginner-friendly thanks to its quality of life features. Next we have Ova Magica, a cozy farming sim mixed with a monster collector, but with its own soft, charming vibe. You move to Clover Town, grow your farm, and build friendships. But the real highlight is collecting these adorable blobs that can help you with daily tasks or join you in battles. You can even crossbreed them to create new ones, which adds a fun layer of discovery as you play. There's also a focus on exploration, where you enter changing blob worlds to find loot, eggs, and rare creatures. The battle system has a bit more depth than expected, and the festivals and character interactions give it that classic cozy life sim feel, just with more personality. That said, it can feel a bit slow and grindy at the start. Stamina management is tight early on, some controls and systems need polishing, and things like breeding and progression could be clearer. But once you get past that early phase, the game opens up and feels much more rewarding. If you enjoy games like farming sims, but want something a little more interactive and creature-focused, this is worth checking out, especially if you don't mind a slower start. Then we have Echoes of the Plum Grove, a cozy farming life sim that starts simple. You wash up on an island called Honeywood and begin rebuilding a small farm. But it slowly turns into something more about survival, relationships, and legacy. You're preparing for harsh winters, managing resources, and shaping a life that can actually continue beyond your first character. When your character grows old and passes on, you keep playing as the next generation in your family. And your choices matter because food can rot, tools break, people can get sick, and even entire families can disappear if things go wrong. At the same time, the game lets you adjust how intense that feels. You can turn off things like disease, aging, or taxes if you just want a more relaxed experience, which makes it flexible depending on your mood. There are, however, moments where the game doesn't explain things clearly, so you might need to figure things out on your own. If you like the idea of your choices carrying weight, building a family over time, and customizing how challenging the game feels, this is worth trying. Next is if you've ever wanted a cozy farming game, but with real stakes, Grimshire might catch you off guard in a good way. You start by escaping your old home and settling into a quiet mountain village where you rebuild a farm and help a small community survive. You're feeding an entire village, preparing for an incoming plague, and making sure everyone gets through each week. That shift alone makes every decision feel pretty meaningful. You're constantly balancing resources, preserving food, and planning ahead so nothing goes to waste. It almost feels like a farming sim mixed with a light management or survival game. That said, this isn't the kind of game you play on autopilot. It can feel overwhelming, especially early on, because you're expected to manage a lot at once. If you enjoy farming sims but want something more challenging and thoughtful, this is a great pick. It's especially for players who like planning, resource management, and games that make your choices matter. And if you've been enjoying these hidden gems and want more games like this, consider subscribing. I share fun and honest recommendations to help you find your next comfort game without the guesswork. Moving on, we have Kinseed. You start a life in a storybook-like world inspired by folklore, farming, building relationships, running shops, and exploring strange lands. But what really stands out is that time keeps moving forward. People age, your character grows old, and eventually you continue the story through your children, turning your playthrough into a full family legacy. You might run a blacksmith shop, experiment with potions, or even trade years of your life for powerful items. There's a lot of freedom in how you live, but it's less about perfect efficiency and more about shaping your own story over time. That said, it can feel a bit overwhelming at first. The UI isn't always clear, some mechanics take time to understand, and because it tries to do a lot, it doesn't always focus deeply on one system like farming alone. Overall, this is for players who enjoy life sims, but want something more narrative and a little unusual. If you like the idea of building a legacy, exploring at your own pace, and discovering systems as you go, rather than being guided step by step, this is a really thoughtful game to check out. Next is Clan Folk, and the game is less about running a farm and more about guiding a family through life. You start with almost nothing in the Scottish Highlands, just a small group of relatives, and your goal is simple but tough: survive, especially through winter. Over time, your family grows, gets married, has kids, and passes down skills, so your little camp slowly turns into a full village with its own story. This game is about planning, routines, and survival. Seasons really matter, summer is for preparing, and winter will test everything you've built. There's no combat or raids, so the challenge comes from managing food, warmth, and your people's daily lives. It feels a bit like a calmer version of Colony Sims, where you're watching a family grow, rather than just optimizing systems. If you like slower, thoughtful games, where you plan ahead and care about your characters, this is worth trying, especially if you enjoy generational storytelling. But if you're looking for fast progress or a very guided experience, this might feel a bit demanding and repetitive over time. Then we have Mirthwood. You start by escaping a war-torn land and building a new life in a medieval fantasy world. At its core, you'll farm, raise animals, craft goods, and slowly grow your homestead. But it doesn't stop there. You're also exploring an open world, fighting enemies like bandits and werewolves, and building relationships with NPCs who live their own lives. Making money isn't as simple as selling crops. You're expected to process them into goods like bread or wine to actually profit. There are also survival elements like hunger, stamina, and weather, plus dynamic events that I really liked. And socially, instead of simple gifting, you interact with characters through conversation choices that affect your relationships. That said, it can also feel slower and more grindy than typical cozy farming sims, especially if you're used to something more streamlined. If you enjoy farming sims but want something more realistic, a bit harder, and closer to an RPG sandbox, this could be your kind of game. It's especially for players who like figuring things out on their own and don't mind a bit of roughness. Next is Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life. I know it isn't exactly a hidden gem, but I feel like a lot of people are passing over this remake and they are missing out. In this game, you move to a quiet valley to take over your late grandfather's farm, build relationships with the townsfolk, fall in love, and eventually raise a child. The game is split into chapters that jump through the years, so you actually watch your character, your family, and your town grow older over time. Your choices don't just affect your farm, they shape your child's personality and future. It's one of the few life sims where time really moves forward in a meaningful way. However, it does feel that gameplay can feel repetitive in the long run, and some systems are simpler than what you might expect if you're coming from more mechanics-heavy games. This is best for players who enjoy emotional, character-driven games and don't mind a slower pace. But if you're looking for deep farming systems, lots of freedom, or constant progression, this one might feel a bit limited, so it's worth going in with the right expectations. If one of these becomes your next comfort game, I'd really love to hear which one you try. And if you're wishing you didn't have to play alone, I've got a cozy co-op list waiting. Click into that next. I'll see you there.